I believe in Shadur Sanders, who I thought should have gone #1 in this year's draft. And you know how much I believe the NFL tried to teach Shedeur and teach his father, Dion, a big, bad lesson by blackballing or whiteballing him as Shedeur fell all the way into the 5th round, where Cleveland finally took Shedeur 50 picks after the Browns had already taken Dillon Gabriel, who, of course, also plays quarterback.
You think you know what elite looks like? You think you've seen quarterbacks who can make magic happen when the lights go out and the cameras stop rolling? Well, what happened behind closed doors last week in Miami has every NFL scout, GM, and team owner losing their minds. I'm talking about Shadur Sanders, the quarterback I believe should have gone #1 in this year's draft. You know how much I believe the NFL tried to teach Shadur and his father, Dion, a lesson by letting him fall all the way to the 5th round, where Cleveland finally grabbed him 50 picks after they'd already taken Dillon Gabriel at the same position. But here's what those teams didn't know. Here's what they couldn't have predicted. Shadur just put on a performance so otherworldly, so jaw-droppingly perfect, that grown men who've been evaluating talent for decades are questioning everything they thought they knew about the quarterback position. The whispers started Tuesday. By Friday, it was all anyone could talk about. And now we know why Deion Sanders has been so confident about his son's NFL future. What you're about to hear will change how you see not just Shadur Sanders, but the entire 2025 NFL draft landscape forever. But I need to warn you about something first. What I'm about to reveal isn't just another workout story. This is the kind of performance that separates legends from pretenders, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why 3 NFL teams have already completely rewritten their draft boards. Before we dive into what happened in that private facility, let me ask you something that's going to put everything in perspective. How many times have you seen a quarterback prospect get hyped up only to fall flat when it matters most? How many times have we watched college stars crumble under the pressure of NFL expectations? Remember Ryan Leaf? The guy who was supposed to be the next Peyton Manning? He had all the physical tools, all the college success, but when the lights got bright and the pressure mounted, he couldn't handle it. Remember Jamarcus Russell? 6'6", rocket arm, could throw a football 70 yards from his knees, and he became one of the biggest busts in NFL history. The graveyard of failed quarterback prospects is littered with players who looked unstoppable in college but couldn't make the transition. Players who dominated against overmatched college defenses but wilted when facing NFL-caliber talent. Players who had all the physical gifts but lacked the mental fortitude to succeed at the highest level. That's exactly what makes what Shadur Sanders did last week so absolutely mind-blowing. Because this wasn't some highlight reel against overmatched college defenses. This wasn't some cherry-picked social media clip designed to boost his draft stock. This was raw, unfiltered NFL-caliber evaluation under the most intense pressure imaginable. Here's what we're going to cover today. First, I'll break down exactly how this private workout came together and why it was unlike anything we've seen before. Then, we'll dive into the specific drills and scenarios that had NFL veterans questioning their own evaluation methods. Finally, I'll reveal the aftermath, the phone calls, the draft board changes, and the seismic shift that's happening right now in NFL front offices across the country. Here's something that's going to blow your mind about how this whole thing started. 3 weeks ago, word began spreading through NFL circles that Shedeur had organized something unprecedented, a private workout session in Miami that would make the NFL Combine look like a casual throwing session. But this wasn't just any facility. We're talking about a training complex that's hosted everyone from Tom Brady to Aaron Rodgers during their off-seasons. The same place where legends go to fine-tune their craft away from prying eyes and the media circus. The kind of facility where million-dollar contracts are won and lost based on split-second decisions and pinpoint accuracy. Now here's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Shedeur didn't just invite a few position coaches and scouts like most prospects do. He invited the Wolves. He invited the harshest critics, the most demanding evaluators, the people who've seen it all and aren't impressed by college accolades or famous last names. Think about the audacity of this move for a second. Most college quarterbacks spend months preparing for controlled environments where they can showcase their best attributes while hiding their weaknesses. They work with specialized trainers to perfect specific throws. They practice scripted scenarios until they can execute them in their sleep. They do everything possible to stack the deck in their favor. Shedeur did the exact opposite. He invited former NFL defensive coordinators who spent decades designing schemes specifically to destroy quarterbacks. We're talking about coaches who've game planned against everyone from Peyton Manning to Patrick Mahomes. Men who know every tell, every weakness, every way to expose a quarterback's limitations. He invited scouts who've evaluated talent for 20-plus years, guys who've seen every type of quarterback prospect imaginable. The kind of evaluators who can spot a fake from a mile away, who know the difference between college success and NFL potential, who've watched countless can't-miss prospects flame out spectacularly. And you know what happened? They all came. Every single one of them. These are people who typically charge thousands of dollars for their evaluation services, who have packed schedules and don't waste time on unproven college players. But something about Shedeur's invitation intrigued them enough to clear their calendars. Picture this scene. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Miami. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, casting long shadows across the pristine training facility. Inside, there's a tension you can cut with a knife. 15 NFL executives, scouts, and coaches are scattered around the field, clipboards in hand, stopwatches ready, their faces stone cold. These aren't people who get excited easily. They've seen every type of quarterback prospect, the athletic freaks who can't read defenses, the pocket passers who crumble under pressure, the system quarterbacks who fall apart when asked to improvise. They've been disappointed more times than they can count. Then Shedeur walks onto the field. No fanfare, no music, no cameras rolling for social media content. Just a young man carrying the weight of a legendary name and the dreams of an entire generation of Colorado football fans. The silence is deafening, and everyone knows that what happens next will determine whether this is just another workout or the beginning of something special. What happened next is where this story transitions from interesting to absolutely insane, and it started with what seemed like the simplest drill imaginable. 40-yard throws to stationary targets. Basic stuff, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. These weren't your typical college receivers running routes in shorts and t-shirts. They brought in former NFL players, guys who know how to create separation at the professional level, who understand the nuances of route running that separate good quarterbacks from great ones. We're talking about receivers who've caught passes from Pro Bowl quarterbacks, who know exactly what NFL caliber accuracy looks like. Shedeur steps up to the line for his first throw. Now, understand something about this moment. Every person in that facility has seen thousands of quarterbacks attempt this exact drill. They know what good looks like. They know what great looks like. And they know the difference between college arm strength and NFL caliber precision. The first throw leaves Shedeur's hand like a laser beam. 40 yards in what feels like the blink of an eye. Perfect spiral, perfect placement, hitting the receiver in stride with the kind of velocity that makes you question the laws of physics. The ball arrives with such precision that the receiver doesn't even have to adjust his hands. The scouts glance at each other, but they're not impressed yet. They've seen good arms before. Strong arms are a dime a dozen in college football. What separates NFL quarterbacks isn't just arm strength, it's anticipation, timing, and the ability to place the ball exactly where it needs to be under pressure. Throw number 2 changes everything. Same distance, but now the receiver is running a comeback route. The degree of difficulty just jumped exponentially. The timing has to be perfect. The anticipation has to be NFL level. The ball has to be placed where only the receiver can get it, in a spot that would be impossible for a defender to intercept. Here's what happens next that makes everyone in that facility stop what they're doing. Shedeur doesn't just complete the pass. He throws it before the receiver even begins his break. Think about what that means. He's reading the receiver's body language, anticipating the exact moment of the route break, and delivering the ball to a spot where it will arrive at the precise instant the receiver turns around. The ball travels through the air while the receiver is still running away from the quarterback. It arrives at the exact moment the receiver completes his break, hitting him in the chest with the kind of precision that makes veteran coaches do double takes. One scout actually drops his clipboard because he's never seen that level of anticipation from a college quarterback. But here's what really separates this moment from every other workout these evaluators have witnessed. The throw isn't just accurate, it's placed with surgical precision in the only spot where the receiver can catch it. 6 inches higher, and it's over his head. 6 inches lower, and it's at his feet. 6 inches to either side, and it's incomplete. This is the kind of throw that NFL quarterbacks spend years perfecting, the kind of precision that determines whether you're a backup or a franchise player. And Shedeur just made it look effortless. But that precision drill was just the warm-up. The real test came when they started simulating actual game situations, and this is where Shadur Sanders went from impressive to absolutely otherworldly. Picture this scenario. They set up a mock defense using former NFL players. Not practice squad guys or has-beens, but players who were starting in the league just 2 years ago. Guys who know how to read quarterbacks, how to disguise coverage, how to make life miserable for signal callers. The kind of defenders who've intercepted passes from established NFL starters. The situation they created was designed to break college quarterbacks. 2-minute drill, down by 6 points, 85 yards to go, no timeouts. This is the kind of pressure that separates pretenders from contenders, the moment where mental toughness matters more than physical ability. Think about what's happening in a quarterback's mind during this scenario. The clock is ticking. Every second matters. One mistake ends the game. The defense knows you have to throw, so they're bringing pressure and playing aggressive coverage. This is where most college quarterbacks either panic and make terrible decisions or freeze up completely. Shedeur walks up to the line of scrimmage, and you can see the defense showing one look while preparing to rotate to something completely different. It's a veteran move designed to create confusion and force bad decisions, the kind of defensive chess match that happens 40 times a game in the NFL. The ball is snapped, and the defense rotates exactly as expected. Lesser quarterbacks would panic. Lesser quarterbacks would force a throw into coverage or take a sack that kills the drive. But Shedeur steps up in the pocket like he's been doing this for a decade, his eyes never leaving the field, scanning, processing, calculating at a speed that defies belief. Then he sees it, a tiny window that opens for maybe half a second. A slot receiver running a dig route with a linebacker who's a step slow in coverage. The window is so small that most college quarterbacks wouldn't even attempt the throw. It requires perfect timing, perfect placement, and absolute confidence in your ability to thread the needle. Shedeur fires a strike that travels between two defenders with inches to spare on either side. The ball hits the receiver in perfect stride, allowing him to turn upfield for additional yards. The linebacker who was supposed to be in coverage stops mid-step and just stares, unable to believe what he just witnessed. But here's what really blew everyone's mind about this play. After the throw, one of the defensive backs approached Shedeur and asked him how he knew the linebacker would be late in coverage. Shedeur's response? "I saw him cheating toward the outside receiver on the previous play. I knew if we ran the same formation, he'd be thinking about that route instead of staying disciplined in his zone." This is the kind of processing and game management that typically takes NFL quarterbacks years to develop. The ability to not just execute plays but to study defensive tendencies and exploit them in real time. And Shedeur was doing it against players who had been making millions of dollars to prevent exactly these kinds of plays. If you thought the game situation drill was impressive, wait until you hear about what happened when they decided to test Shedeur's pocket presence under pressure. This is where they separated the men from the boys, where they found out if all that precision and game management would hold up when 250-pound pass rushers were trying to separate his head from his shoulders. They brought in pass rushers who weren't just former NFL players, they were former Pro Bowlers. Guys who spent years terrorizing NFL quarterbacks, who know every move, every technique, every way to make a signal caller's life miserable. We're talking about players who have strip sack highlights against Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. The setup was absolutely brutal. 7-step drops, deep routes that take time to develop, and these pass rushers coming with everything they've got. No holding back, no going easy on the college kid with the famous name. This was as close to real NFL pass rush as you can get without putting on pads and playing an actual game. Shedeur takes the snap, and immediately the pocket starts collapsing like a house of cards. There's a speed rusher coming off the edge with a first step that would make Olympic sprinters jealous. There's a bull rush up the middle from a defensive tackle who bench presses small cars for fun. And there's a delayed blitz from a linebacker who's timing his rush perfectly to arrive just as the quarterback reaches the back of his drop. Any normal quarterback would be running for his life or eating turf. The pocket is disintegrating around him, and he's got maybe 2 seconds before multiple 250-pound athletes converge on his location. This is where most college quarterbacks either panic and scramble aimlessly or get planted into the ground while trying to make a hero throw. But Shedeur does something that makes everyone in that facility question what they just witnessed. He slides 2 steps to his left, not scrambling, not panicking, just making a subtle adjustment that buys him an extra half second. His eyes never leave the downfield coverage. He's processing the defense while simultaneously avoiding the rush, doing 2 incredibly difficult things at the same time. Then, while being hit, while a 260-pound pass rusher is driving him toward the ground, he delivers a 30-yard strike between 2 defenders that hits his receiver in perfect stride. The timing is so precise that the ball arrives just as the receiver comes out of his break, allowing him to catch it and turn upfield without breaking stride. The pass rusher who's about to plant him in the ground actually stops mid-tackle and watches the ball sail over his head into the receiver's hands. He later told reporters, "I've hit a lot of quarterbacks in my career, and most of them are just trying to survive while I'm coming at them. This kid delivered a perfect pass while I was driving him into the ground. I've never seen anything like it." The facility goes dead silent for a moment, then one scout starts clapping, then another. Within seconds, the entire group is on their feet applauding like they just witnessed something historic. Because they had. Now, if you think what we've covered so far was impressive, you haven't heard anything yet. Because what happened next revealed something about Shadur Sanders that goes far beyond physical ability or even mental toughness. It showed a level of football intelligence that most NFL quarterbacks don't develop until their 3rd or 4th year in the league. They decided to run full team scenarios, dividing the participants into 2 teams and running legitimate NFL plays. Not simplified college concepts or basic route combinations, but full NFL playbooks with hot routes, audibles, and protection schemes that would make most college quarterbacks' heads spin. The kind of complex offensive systems that take veteran NFL quarterbacks years to master. Here's where this story takes another incredible turn. Shedeur didn't just execute the plays that were called. He started making adjustments at the line of scrimmage. He started calling audibles based on what he was seeing from the defense. He started doing things that coaches typically don't expect from rookies until their 2nd or 3rd year in the league. On one particular play that had everyone talking afterward, Shedeur approached the line and immediately recognized a safety rotation that would leave his slot receiver in single coverage against a linebacker. This is advanced pre-snap recognition that separates elite quarterbacks from everyone else, the ability to process defensive alignments in real time and exploit weaknesses before the ball is even snapped. But here's what happened next that left everyone speechless. Instead of just taking advantage of the mismatch, Shedeur checked out of the entire play. He signaled a hot route to his slot receiver, changed the protection scheme to account for a potential blitz, and adjusted the timing of the entire route concept, all in about 8 seconds at the line of scrimmage. When the ball was snapped, the defense executed exactly what Shedeur had diagnosed. The safety rotated late, the linebacker was isolated on the slot receiver, and there was a clear throwing lane for an easy touchdown. But instead of just completing the pass, Shedeur delivered it with such perfect timing and placement that the receiver caught it in stride and walked into the end zone untouched. The defensive coordinator who had set up that coverage scheme stood there with his mouth open because he'd just been outcoached by a college quarterback. This is a man who spent 15 years in the NFL designing defenses to stop the best quarterbacks in the world, and a 22-year-old had just dissected his scheme like he was reading a children's book. But what happened after the play is what really separated this moment from anything these evaluators had ever witnessed. Shedeur walked over to the defensive players and started asking them questions. Not trash-talking or celebrating, but genuinely wanting to understand their perspective. "What were you thinking when you saw me check to that route?" he asked the linebacker who had been beaten on the play. "How would you adjust your coverage if you saw that same formation again?" These aren't the kinds of questions you hear from college quarterbacks. These are the questions that veteran NFL players ask each other when they're trying to elevate their game. One former NFL linebacker later told reporters, "I've worked out with quarterbacks who've been in the league for 10 years, and they don't ask the questions this kid was asking." He wasn't just executing plays, he was studying the game at a level that I didn't see from some starting quarterbacks I played with. The most incredible part? This wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout the entire workout, Shedeur was constantly processing information, making adjustments, and demonstrating a level of football IQ that typically takes years to develop. He was reading defensive body language, recognizing coverage rotations, and making split-second decisions that showed he understood not just what to do, but why to do it. By this point in the workout, the atmosphere had completely changed. The skeptical evaluators who had walked in with their typical show-me attitudes were frantically scribbling notes and whispering to each other. You could see the excitement in their eyes, the way they kept glancing back at Shedeur like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The workout lasted for hours of non-stop, high-intensity, NFL-level evaluation that would have broken most college quarterbacks. But by the end, something unprecedented happened that's still sending shockwaves through NFL front offices across the country. The scouts and coaches who had walked in with their typical skeptical attitudes started approaching each other with a sense of urgency that nobody had expected. You could see the excitement in their eyes, the way they were frantically scribbling notes, the way they kept glancing back at Shedeur like they couldn't believe what they just witnessed. One general manager, who asked to remain anonymous, was overheard saying something that's been repeated in NFL circles ever since. "We just watched the most complete quarterback performance I've seen from a college player in 20 years. This kid isn't just ready for the NFL, he's ready to start from day one." But the real proof of how this workout changed everything came in the 48 hours that followed. Within 2 days, 3 different teams had reached out to Shedeur's representation asking about additional private workouts. These weren't teams that had shown casual interest, these were franchises that were suddenly willing to restructure their entire draft strategies. The New York Giants, who have been searching for their franchise quarterback for years, allegedly sent their head coach and offensive coordinator to watch film of the workout. Think about what that means. NFL head coaches don't personally review workout footage unless they're seeing something that could change their franchise's trajectory. The Las Vegas Raiders, who need a young quarterback to build around, reportedly had their owner personally call Shedeur's agent. When NFL owners start making personal phone calls, you know something significant is happening. These are billion-dollar decisions, and owners don't get involved unless they believe they're looking at a potential franchise-altering talent. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from teams that weren't even at the workout. Draft boards that had Shedeur listed as a second or third round pick were being completely rewritten. Scouts who had never seriously considered him as a first-round talent were suddenly having emergency meetings with their general managers. The rumors started flying through NFL circles like wildfire. Teams that had been focused on other positions were suddenly shifting their attention to quarterback. Front offices that had been comfortable with their current quarterback situations were starting to ask themselves if they could afford to pass on this kind of talent. When asked about the reports of his son's performance, Deion Sanders just smiled and said something that's been quoted in every major sports publication. "I told y'all he was ready." Nobody wanted to listen. That confidence, that swagger that had seemed like typical Deion bravado, was starting to make a lot more sense. The most incredible part of this entire story is that we're just seeing the beginning. Industry insiders are saying that this workout has fundamentally changed how Shadur Sanders is viewed as a prospect. Teams that had written him off are now scrambling to get back in the conversation. Draft analysts who had him ranked outside the first round are completely revising their evaluations. What we're witnessing here isn't just a great workout story. This is the emergence of a quarterback who's been preparing for this moment his entire life, a player who's had access to the best coaching, the best training, and the best knowledge from one of the greatest athletes in sports history. But more importantly, a player who's taken all of that privilege and transformed it into something truly special. The question now isn't whether Shadur Sanders can play in the NFL. After what happened in Miami, that question has been definitively answered. The real questions are, how high is he going to rise in the draft? Which team is going to be smart enough to build their future around him? And how quickly is he going to transform whichever franchise is lucky enough to select him? In a league where quarterback play determines championship windows, where finding the right signal caller can transform a franchise overnight, a performance like this is worth everything. It's the difference between mediocrity and greatness, between hoping for the playoffs and competing for Super Bowls. If what we're hearing is true, if Shadur Sanders really did put on a clinic that had NFL veterans questioning everything they thought they knew about evaluating quarterbacks, then we might be looking at the beginning of a new era. Not just for Shadur, but for whichever team is bold enough to recognize what they have in front of them. The next few months are going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. Draft boards are being reshuffled as we speak. Team strategies are being reconsidered. And somewhere in Colorado, a young quarterback is continuing to prepare for a future that's looking brighter by the day. But here's what I want you to remember as we watch this story unfold. Sometimes greatness announces itself quietly, in private workouts away from cameras and crowds. Sometimes the most important moments happen when nobody's watching except the people who matter most. And sometimes, just sometimes, a young quarterback with a legendary name lives up to every bit of the hype and then some. What do you think? Are we witnessing the emergence of the next great NFL quarterback, or is this just another case of workout warrior syndrome that won't translate to game day success? Let me know in the comments below, because this story is far from over, and I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this workout for years to come.